Hey everyone, how is it going? It's Nordic here. Welcome back to yet again another Tier Rank Tuesday, the first Tier Rank Tuesday in a very long time, where today we are going to be looking at the trade deadline and tier ranking every team's deadline, in my opinion. So, this is going to be a little bit different than our usual ones because we're not going off of oh, they did something, did nothing, we're going off of grades, more or less. So this is the tier list with grades, if that makes any sense. And yeah, let's just hop straight into it because we got a lot to go through in not a lot of time. So first off, the Anaheim Ducks. Now, I think it's fair for Anaheim. They really only made one move where they acquired they acquired a second round pick for Brian Dumoulin. And apart from that, they really didn't do a lot. And I don't think it's fair to put them in F. Just mainly because, just because they didn't do anything doesn't mean they should be an F. A lot of the teams you're going to see that did not do a lot are going to be in C. There are going to be some teams that are lower than that based on expectations. But as for the Anaheim Ducks, they didn't do anything, in my opinion, that was really crazy, that was really good, that was really bad. And they really weren't expected to do anything either. I wasn't really that mad that they stayed put. I thought it was fine because I think they're playing better hockey than they have in many years prior. And I think that, there's really no point in buying in on a player that could disrupt the chemistry with that roster. And they're not making the playoffs, so there's no point in really buying. I guess you can maybe sell off a player, but I think you're past that at this point. You can't just go every single year with, sell, 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 sell. So you kind of have to have years where you just stay put. So I think that's totally fair from what the Ducks did. Next up then, the Red Wings. The order is very weird. You're going to find that out. We go through all the teams alphabetically, and then we get to Boston randomly. So it's very strange. But next up is the Red Wings, who, in my opinion, they didn't do a lot. Obviously, that's very obvious. It's very key when you just look at the numbers and the trades. To be honest with you, you expected more. I'm going to go D, and I might go F later on. Because, again, I'm not expecting for Detroit to do a ton. But this fan base especially is really upset at the fact that they took another deadline where they stayed quiet and did nothing, because they did that last year, and look at what happened last year. And now, I guess because maybe there's a losing streak in there and they've lost 6 in a row, and there's a lot of upset fans right now. But I think overall, they really weren't expected to do a whole lot. And I think that, again, I still would have rather them do something. Go out and get a defenseman. Go out and get maybe a center, maybe to cover, Andrew Kopp being out. Again, I'm not saying that you need to do something insane, but at least something to show the fans that, yeah, we want to award this team for how they have been doing. And in a very competitive Eastern wildcard race, sure, if you miss, maybe, you give up assets for no reason. Maybe that's why you should go out and get someone with term. And I get it. The prices were crazy this year. You were paying second-round picks for third-liners and third-pairing defensemen. But, again, this team hasn't made the playoffs in 9 years. It will be up to this point. So I don't understand why, Stevie Wilde's didn't do something besides acquire a goaltender when they literally have 8 goaltenders as it is. It's just very strange to me, in my opinion. But yeah, the Red Wings are going in D. At least for now. I might change that, though, down to F, but I'll see what other teams I put there. Next up, the Oilers. I wanted more from the Oilers. I'm not going to lie to you. I wanted a goalie. I wanted a right-handed shot defenseman. However, they did get Jake Wallman, who, in his time with Edmonton, at least so far, now keep in mind that's only a game or two, he has looked pretty good. So we'll put them in B. Look, I again, as I said, I did want more. I don't think Wallman was necessarily what they needed entirely, but I don't think it's still bad. You got a guy who's on a really cheap contract for next year as well. So it's a guy with term, and I think that is a good trade. And, the Trent Frederick one with Max Jones also looks really good as well. Again, I still would have liked more, but I think they didn't do as bad as some of the other teams that I wanted more from. They still at least made some moves that, made people pretty satisfied. Now, Florida should be very obvious. They are A. They got Seth Jones. They got Brad Marchand. They're clearly an A. They're the favorite. They got a goalie in Vitek Vanacek who's going to be the backup as opposed to Stolarz last year in the playoffs. So, again, I would be shocked if Florida loses in the first or second round. Actually, I won't say that. I wouldn't be shocked because, again, Kachuk's coming back in the playoffs and he may not be like 100%. So that's obviously something you got to look at there too. But they're without a doubt an A. There's no question about that whatsoever. Now the Kings. The Kings are very interesting. I wanted more from LA. I wanted more from LA, which is why I'm going to put them in D. However, I am not as mad at them as I am with Detroit because I think for Detroit, I was very frustrated with the fact that they didn't do a lot. I didn't expect them to do a ton again, but I still wanted something. Same goes for LA, but at least they tried. At least they cut out and went and got Kuzmenko. I get it. The prices this year are absolutely atrocious, just with, it being a seller's market and all. But I wanted more. I feel like Rob Blake's job's on the line, and the best he can do is trade for Kuzmenko, who, to be honest with you, he was good in this stint with Philadelphia, but wasn't, star-studded or anything like that. So, a little bit of a head-scratcher for me. We'll have to see where things go with the Kings. But, again, it's looking like they're going towards another first-round exit versus the Oilers at that. Maybe they'll play Vegas, but I don't see them beating Vegas either, let's be honest. Just really unfortunate, but yeah, the Kings for me are a D. Next up then, Minnesota. Minnesota went out and made some underrated moves. They went out and got Justin Brazeau, who I'm a pretty big fan of. I like him. I'm going to give them, it's going to look weird now, but they're going to be on the lower end of B or the higher end of C by the end of this tier list. Because I think that I like the moves they made. They didn't make a lot of them, but they also didn't need to make that many moves. And I like the Brazeau one because he's a good third liner you're acquiring there. And you didn't give up anything that was insane. Again, Kuznetsov is young and all, and he has potential, but he's struggled in the NHL. Sometimes it's hard for Russians to adjust to the NHL game, and Kuznetsov's a big example of that. So maybe he goes to Boston and plays pretty well. But I think, it's not a big loss. Again, if you were trading maybe, I don't know, one of their top prospects, then I'm like, all right, I don't know about that. But Kuznetsov, not a big loss there for the Wild, in my opinion. So they're on the lower end of B or the higher end of C. So it just doesn't look good as of right now. But once we get through all the teams, it'll look a lot better. Now, Montreal is an interesting case because they didn't do a lot. And they're going to go in the same place as Anaheim. I think that's totally fair. They didn't do a ton for me. That was insane. They signed Jake Evans to a really good contract, and I was a fan of that. And I didn't really expect them to do much else. They really couldn't do much else. The only options they really had were to, trade Savard and Armia. They could have got a second for Armia, which it's a loss on asset value, but who cares? What good is that second really going to do to you at this point in the rebuild? They already have their prospect pool pretty much sorted out. They're going to get another decent pick this year and get another solid player. So I think overall, you didn't really expect a lot from Montreal, and I think it's fair putting them in the average tier if they didn't do anything. And by expectations, did some fans want to see them buy so they could maybe get into the playoffs? Maybe, but I think Ken Hughes basically said to this team, I believe in you guys. I know what you guys are capable of, and I think you guys can get it done. I think that's what he probably said. But overall, I wasn't expecting a ton of moves from the Montreal Canadiens there whatsoever. Now, Nashville, I feel like could have done more. I'm going to put them in D, the higher end of D. I felt like they could have done more, and the moves that they made at that were a little bit head-scratching. They didn't trade for future assets. I feel like with what they did at the deadline, they honestly might just go into next offseason, draft those picks, and then go for it next year with the same roster. That seems like what they're going to do. Could it work? Maybe. Again, we see teams sometimes they don't work right away and then they have to come back the next year and play. I could see that happening. That's a real possibility, but I wanted more. I wanted more from them in terms of, paper transactions and things like that. But I'm not as mad as them as I am at the other teams. But yeah, overall, they didn't do a ton that really was big for me. But yeah, Nashville goes in the D tier there, the higher end D tier. Next up, the Devils. The Devils are another interesting case. They didn't do a lot. I can't lie to you. With Jack Hughes being out and Dougie Hamilton being out, they made a couple of moves. They re-signed Kovacevic. They went out. They got Daniel Sprong. They made a couple minor moves that didn't make anything that was big. They got Cody Glass as well. I didn't really expect them to do a lot, though. Like, you're not going to go all in with no Jack Hughes. You're not going to go out and get, like, again, with how the prices were this year, I know there were a lot of people who were like, oh, go use your salary cap and go out and get someone big. If they use their salary cap, they're giving up literally all their assets. And I don't think that is really worth it, especially with no Jack Hughes. So, again, I just don't think that it's, the best thing to do. So I'm going to put them in C. I'm not saying look. I'm not saying that what they did was the right thing, but I think that overall, like I don't really know what you would expect them to do because the prices are insane. If they went on and got a Brock Nelson, you're giving up your first for this year. You're giving up a top prospect, which I guess who cares? But unless if you're getting someone with term, I think it's a waste of asset management. So I get what Tom Fitzgerald's trying to do. But the Devils, they damn well may miss the playoffs because of this. So we'll have to see. Now the Islanders. The Islanders I got a lot of flack for when I posted my grade on Instagram saying that they got an A-. There's going to be a lot of teams in A because I liked what a lot of teams did, to be honest with you. Now, for New York, they finally decided to sell. They finally sold, and they traded Brock Nelson away for Callum Ritchie and a first-round pick. Now, one thing that I've learned is Ritchie is a very polarizing prospect. Either you love him or you don't like him. And I fall in the middle. I think he still can be really good. I think he's a top 30 guy in terms of prospects in a rankings. But overall, that first-round pick, which is going to be a stacked one in a stacked draft next year, I've seen some people say, oh, it's going to be a late pick. I mean, first off, you don't know that. Secondly, it's still a really stacked draft this year, and still, a first-round pick is a first-round pick, no matter where it is. So overall, I think that the Islanders made out good, but just because of that one trade, they're an A-. I might put them in the B tier. We'll have to see. But overall, I think you could have done a lot of things. And you could have bought, which seemed like what they were going to do. I would have loved it if they traded Palmieri, but I don't think the offers were there for Lamoriello to be like, yeah, we'll get rid of him. But overall, I think for the Islanders, it was good on them for selling. And I wonder, like, what if they sold their other players? They could have a sea of assets. But overall, just it's been a rough year for them, and I think they did good on that Nelson trade. Most importantly, next up, the Rangers. The Rangers made a lot of weird moves. If you include Miller, I think it looks fine. They traded for a lot of depth defensemen, a lot of guys that add to their core, like Borgen earlier in the season. They traded away Riley Smith for Brisson in a third. Like, they did good. I'm not saying that they were bad. They're a B though. They're not an A for me. I think the moves they made were still pretty good. You didn't give up a ton of assets the other way that are like, oh my god, that's insane. I don't think they have their first. I believe Pittsburgh will have it. But overall, just still, they didn't do anything that was, like, insane. They made some minor moves, acquiring Sussy, acquiring a couple other players on that back end, a few depth players as well. But nothing big that really struck us, surprised us, I guess, besides Miller. But that was, like, way before the deadline, even, like, 2 months out. So overall, I'm not really, I guess you could include that, but not really. But yeah, for me, they're a B. Boston. Yeah, weird order again, as I said. Randomly just put Boston in there in the alphabetical order of teams. This is going to be a hot take. They're an A for me. They're in the A- type tier. Listen, overall, I just think that they had a lot of people gave me flack for that because they said with the Marchand one, yes, the Marchand one was bad. And the thing with Sweeney and the negotiating wasn't great. I understand that. It wasn't a good look. I'm going to tell you this, though. Above all, they had a good deadline. The Coyle trade was good. They got Middlestat, who can be a young second or third line center for this team if it works out. They got Will Zellers, who's lighting up the USHL right now, 18-year-old. I think he's going to be a really talented under-the-radar player. He won't be in the NHL for a while, but he's a very under-the-radar player there. And then you got picks. In the Carlo deal, you get a first, which, again, who gives a shit if it's a later first? It's still a first. And then Fraser Minton, who I think isn't, like, the greatest prospect. I feel like he's only well-rated because he's a Toronto prospect. But still, I think he can be a really good player. We saw that in the NHL this year. He can be a consistent guy. And that is better than nothing from Boston's pool. It is better that they do that rather than just keep them and have them walk in free agency. And the same thing can be said for Marchand, because I think we would have had the same problem come free agency in June if they kept Marchand and they had trouble signing him. Now, again, you had more time to work it out, obviously. And, am I saying that that was handled the right way? No. Of course, I'm not saying that Sweeney did the right thing there in moving away, their captain over like a 1.3 or 1.7 disagreement in cap. No, I'm not saying that that's the right thing at all. But if we're being honest, I think trading him away for a conditional second, which will likely become a first, barring a massive upset in the playoffs, I wouldn't say that's bad. They got 2 firsts, essentially. Now, again, you have to wait for that first to pan out and pan into, a first-round pick. But they got 2 firsts. And again, I've saw some people say, oh, Sweeney's bad at drafting. Yeah, sure, totally. But it's still a first, no matter how you want to look at it. And who's to say Boston keeps those first? Knowing their history, who's to say that? And who's to say Don Sweeney even keeps his job? Like, that might not even happen either. So, overall, I feel like Boston's trade deadline is really overhated just because of how they handled the Marchand situation, which I agree, it was poorly handled. But they still had a pretty damn good deadline, in my opinion. And I think that has to be shown, for sure. All right, next up, the Ottawa Senators. I think the Sens had a really good trade deadline. And in my opinion, from the Instagram post that I made, has really changed drastically. I think they've had a better deadline than the Islanders, than Boston. I think they had a better deadline than all of them. Now, there is some risk with that Cousins and Norris deal, because I think that, Cousins struggled in Buffalo. He could still struggle with the Sens, but so far he hasn't. He's a point per game in Ottawa. Again, it's only 2 games played. He's physical. He's very noticeable out there as well in an Ottawa uniform, and I think that trade's going to work out perfectly. And again, I said it in my video when I covered the trade on Friday. I said I would rather a struggling, need of a change of scenery Dylan Cousins rather than a risk in Josh Norris, who has injury problems. I would rather a struggling Dylan Cousins in a way. I get it. Maybe Cousins is getting paid more money or something like that. I think Norris actually gets paid more, but I think overall they're winning that trade, at least as of right now. And then the other move where they got Zetterlund, I think that looked really good too. Last night against the Red Wings, with their MVP live stream night, he looked pretty damn good. Again, that's a little bit too early to tell, but getting a younger forward for not a lot, I think it's definitely a good move, and he's going to fit in well in that second power play unit. The thing is, though, I wonder how they're going to fit all those guys into the lineup, because it seems like now they have too many players. But we will see. We will see there with Ottawa, but overall, I think they had a pretty good deadline, and I think that it should not go unnoticed. Next up, then, the Philadelphia Flyers. The Flyers moves, I like what they did. They traded Lawton for a first and Nikita Grabankin, who I think is going to be a great Flyer when he does get here. And they also traded Eric Johnson for Giovanni Smith. We'll see how he fits in the lineup. And then as well as that, too, they also made a move and traded Kuzmenko to the Kings for a third. I think they did pretty good. Again, I wanted them to trade Risto. It's not the end of the world, but I'm going to give them B. I think that overall, getting rid of Lawton the way they did and getting a first-round pick back the other way, I think it's a good move. I think it's a great trade. And I think that, trading away Johnson, trading away Kuzmenko, they show that they are selling. And now you can tell when you watch these games that they're playing, they really are, tanking. They are tanking hard at that. So, yeah, overall, I think what Philly did has been really good and has been great. And I think that overall, looking in terms of the future, they're looking at a lot better of a spot. Would I rather more? Yeah. I mean, I would have liked the 2026 first round pick, because to be honest with you, 2027, I don't know a lot about that draft. What I do know about 26 is that it's very stacked, as I've said many times. But overall, I think that it's not a big deal, to be honest. It's still a first round pick. But yeah, I think the Flyers did pretty good this deadline. All right, I made a couple of changes to this. I moved Colorado and Tampa Bay up past Ottawa and all the other teams. I moved Toronto up a spot. Actually, I'm going to make one more change here. I'm going to move Toronto up past Boston and the Islanders and the Sens and just put them right there. I think that that's right. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I kept the B tier the same. I swapped a couple of teams on the C tier, and then I swapped Detroit and Vancouver on the D tier. But yeah, that is my trade deadline grade / tier list. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. This is a fun one. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure to like the video down below. Please do consider subscribing to join the community that we are building here on this channel. New Watch with Nordic on Thursday. Doubleheader, Golden Knights versus Blue Jackets and Capitals versus Kings. Gonna be a fun night. Thank you for watching, and we'll see ya in the next video. All right, I made a couple of changes to this. I moved Colorado and Tampa Bay up past Ottawa and all the other teams. I moved Toronto up a spot. Actually, I'm going to make one more change here. I'm going to move Toronto up past Boston and the Islanders and the Sens and just put them right there. I think that that's right. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I kept the B tier the same. I swapped a couple of teams on the C tier, and then I swapped Detroit and Vancouver on the D tier. But yeah, that is my trade deadline grade / tier list. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. This is a fun one. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure to like the video down below. Please do consider subscribing to join the community that we are building here on this channel. New Watch with Nordic on Thursday. Doubleheader, Golden Knights versus Blue Jackets and Capitals versus Kings. Gonna be a fun night. Thank you for watching, and we'll see ya in the next video.